It was just another late night at the office until my boss locked the door and her daughter slipped in behind me. The office always felt different after hours. When the chatter faded and the phone stopped ringing, silence settled in, a kind of hush that made every small sound seem personal. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft tapping of rain against the tall windows, even the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. They all filled the space that once belonged to a dozen voices. I stayed late that evening, finishing the quarterly report Miss Hartley had asked for. She was my boss, precise, composed, and always immaculate in a way that made me check my own reflection twice before speaking to her. Everyone admired her professionalism. I admired something else too, the calm authority in her voice, the warmth she tried to hide behind it. When the last of my coworkers waved goodbye, I told myself I'd leave soon. But just as the door clicked shut behind them, I heard her heels on the marble floor. Slow, measured steps. She appeared in the doorway with a faint smile, that kind that never reached her eyes completely, but softened everything around her. "Still here?" she asked, setting her tablet on the table beside me. "Just wrapping up the report," I said, my voice a little too formal. She nodded, glancing at the screen over my shoulder. Then, with a quiet click, I heard it, the sound of the lock turning. The metallic echo felt louder than it should have, settling somewhere between my chest and my throat. She didn't seem to notice the effect it had on me. Or maybe she did. "I hate interruptions," she murmured, her tone casual, almost distracted. "Let's just finish this in peace." Peace. That's what she called it. But it didn't feel peaceful at all. The scent of her perfume drifted through the air, faint sandalwood, and something floral I couldn't name. She leaned over slightly, one hand resting on the edge of my desk as her eyes followed the figures on the spreadsheet. Her sleeve brushed against my arm. Just fabric against fabric, yet it sent a quiet spark through me, sharp and warm at once. She noticed me stiffen slightly and smiled, that small, knowing smile that told me she was used to being noticed. But there was no arrogance in it, only awareness. The kind of awareness that made silence feel like a conversation. "Good work," she said softly, her voice lowering a tone. "You're more patient than most." I wanted to answer, but my throat felt dry. Instead, I nodded and focused on the screen, pretending to recheck a number that didn't matter. Behind her, the blinds swayed faintly with the wind, casting slow, striped shadows across her face. For a moment, it looked like she was standing in two worlds, the one where she was my boss, and another where she didn't have to be. And in that quiet, locked room, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't afraid of the door being locked. I was afraid of how much I didn't want it to open. The rain outside had turned steady, tapping against the windows in a patient rhythm. Miss Hartley and I worked in near silence, the kind that didn't feel uncomfortable anymore, just charged, like the air right before thunder. She sat across from me now, reviewing printouts, her reading glasses balanced low on her nose. Every now and then, she'd hum softly to herself, a sound almost too gentle for this office built on deadlines and precision. It made the space feel strangely human. Then, without warning, a knock. Soft, hesitant, out of place in that quiet. Miss Hartley looked up, surprised. Before she could answer, the door creaked open. A young woman stepped inside, early 20s, rain-dark hair falling loosely around her shoulders. She held 2 paper cups in her hands and a teasing smile that felt instantly familiar. "Mom," she said, half sighing, half laughing. "You're still here?" "Mom." The word landed like a small revelation. Miss Hartley's expression softened, the kind of softness I hadn't seen before. "Ella," she said, almost whispering it. "What are you doing here this late?" Ella shrugged, stepping farther in. "You weren't answering your phone. I figured you'd be in your second home." She glanced around the office, then at me. "Didn't realize you had company." Her gaze held curiosity, not suspicion, but it was enough to make me shift slightly in my chair. "I'm just finishing some reports," I managed to say. "Oh, the famous reports," she teased, setting one of the coffees on my desk. "You look like you could use this more than she does." Her tone was playful, her presence a contrast, light where her mother was composed, spontaneous where Miss Hartley was deliberate. And yet, something about them mirrored each other, the same intelligence in their eyes, the same graceful posture that came from quiet confidence. Miss Hartley sighed, but there was affection in it. "Ella, you shouldn't have come out in the rain." Then maybe come home before midnight next time, Ella replied, smiling. The small exchange drew a laugh from me, a short one, but real. Both women turned toward the sound. Miss Hartley's expression softened further, and Ella's smile widened, as if she'd just succeeded at something. The office, moments ago cold and orderly, now felt alive, filled with warmth, voices, and the faint scent of rain and coffee. Ella slid onto the edge of the desk beside me, unwrapping a scarf from her neck. The fabric brushed my arm as she leaned slightly closer, her voice lowering conspiratorially. You work for her. Tell me, does she ever take a break? I hesitated, glancing at Miss Hartley, who raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. Not really, I admitted. She's focused. Focused, Ella echoed, smiling. That's one word for it. Miss Hartley shook her head, but she was smiling too. And in that moment, the locked office, the mother and daughter, the quiet warmth of shared laughter, I realized something had shifted. The tension hadn't disappeared. It had simply changed shape. The rain grew heavier, like it had no intention of stopping. It beat softly against the tall windows, filling the office with a steady rhythm, a heartbeat for the silence between us. We stayed there, the three of us, surrounded by folders, glowing screens, and the warm hum of the desk lamp. Something about the scene felt oddly domestic, as if the office had turned into a living room where no one was in a rush to leave. Then, without warning, the power flickered. Once, twice. The lights dimmed, leaving only the faint orange glow of the emergency fixture by the door. Ella laughed lightly. Well, that's one way to end overtime. MS. Hartley sighed, rubbing her temple. The storm must have tripped something again. It'll be fine. Her voice was calm, but softer than before, less like a boss, more like a woman who finally allowed herself to exhale. For a while, we just listened. To the rain, to the faint creak of the building, to each other breathing in the quiet. I didn't realize how much I'd missed silence that wasn't empty. Ella leaned back in her chair, legs crossed, coffee cup in hand. You two really do this every night? Not every night, Miss Hartley replied, though the small smile at the corner of her lips betrayed her. She's lying, Ella said, turning to me. She forgets time when she's working. Always has. Even when I was a kid, she'd stay up past midnight, typing by the kitchen window. The admission seemed to surprise her mother. Miss Hartley looked over, eyes soft. You remember that? Of course, Ella said. I used to sit on the stairs and watch you. You looked untouchable, like nothing could ever break you. For a moment, the storm outside became background noise to something deeper, the sound of truth being spoken after years of holding it in. Miss Hartley didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. You make it sound stronger than it felt. I wasn't unbreakable, Ella. I just didn't want you to see me tired. The words hung in the air. I didn't dare interrupt, though my chest felt tight with something I couldn't name. Respect, maybe. Or empathy. Ella reached out and gently touched her mother's hand. You did great, you know, she whispered. For a second, Miss Hartley didn't move. Then, she turned her hand over and held her daughter's fingers in hers. Watching them, I felt something shift, like I was witnessing a piece of their history heal in front of me. And somehow, I was part of it, though I didn't belong to either of their worlds. When Miss Hartley looked up, her eyes met mine across the soft glow of the lamp. She smiled faintly, tired, honest. Thank you for staying, she said. Her hand brushed my wrist briefly as she stood to fetch more candles from her office. Just a light touch, but enough to leave warmth lingering there long after she'd stepped away. By the time the storm began to fade, the city outside had blurred into a watercolor of lights. The rain eased into a whisper, sliding down the glass in thin silver trails. Inside, the air had grown still, almost too still, as though the office was holding its breath. Miss Hartley returned with a small candle she'd found in the break room. Something meant for emergencies, but it cast a soft amber glow that gentled every edge of the room. It made her look different, somehow. Less like a manager beneath bright lights, and more like a woman caught in a rare moment of calm. She placed it between us. The flame flickered across her features, the faint lines near her eyes, the thoughtful stillness in her mouth. Beside her, Ella sat cross-legged on the desk, watching her mother with something between admiration and quiet challenge. I sat between them, not physically, but in feeling, the steady bridge between two different worlds. Ella broke the silence first. You know, you two are more alike than you realize. Her mother raised an eyebrow. How so? You both forget to breathe when you're focused, Ella said, smiling faintly. You both hate small talk. And you both try to hide when something actually matters to you. Miss Hartley sighed, amused. That's quite an observation. Comes from growing up with you, Ella replied, still smiling. Their words danced lightly, but beneath it I sensed the truth, a history that hadn't always been easy. I could see it in Miss Hartley's eyes when she looked at her daughter, a mix of love and guilt, of wanting to protect and needing to let go. I tried to stay quiet, but she caught my gaze. You have a sister, don't you? She asked softly. I nodded. Younger. About Ella's age, actually. She smiled a little at that. Then you understand what it's like, the distance that creeps in when you both start growing up too fast. Her words landed gently but deeply. The candlelight swayed, catching in her hair, reflecting in Ella's curious eyes. And for a heartbeat, I felt connected to both of them. Her maturity and restraint, Ella's sincerity and spark, as though they were two reflections of the same light. Ella leaned closer, nudging me lightly with her shoulder. You make her talk more than anyone at work ever has, she said quietly. I chuckled, but it came out softer than I meant it to. Maybe it's just the storm. Miss Hartley looked down, smiling, a real one this time, unguarded. Or maybe it's time I stopped pretending that work is the only thing that matters. The moment hung between us, warm, fragile, full of unspoken meanings. Then the rain stopped completely. Outside, the city exhaled under the first hint of moonlight. Inside, the three of us sat in that stillness, caught between laughter and something deeper, something that felt almost like home. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward midnight. Outside, the city had gone quiet, its energy dimmed to a soft hum that drifted through the glass. The candle on the desk had burned low, a thin curl of smoke rising from its wick. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm of talking and silence, each pause as meaningful as the words between. Then Miss Hartley's phone buzzed on the table. The screen flashed with a name she didn't want to see. Her expression shifted, a small frown, quick but telling. She stood and excused herself, stepping toward the hallway to take the call. The door clicked behind her, and suddenly, the office felt different again, not empty, but suspended, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Ella leaned back in her chair, her eyes following her mother's silhouette through the glass wall. Then she turned to me, a half-smile tugging at her lips. She never really stops, does she? I shook my head. No, I don't think she knows how. She used to be like that even when I was little, she said softly. Always fixing, always planning. Like if she stopped moving, something might fall apart. Her tone wasn't bitter, just wistful, honest. I think that's what makes her strong, I said. Ella looked at me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You sound like you understand her more than most people do. I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe because part of me didn't understand why I understood her, why I noticed the way her voice softened when she forgot she was supposed to be in control, or the way she looked out at the rain like she was remembering something. Ella shifted closer, elbows on her knees, voice quieter now. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever feel caught between what's right and what feels right? The question hung there, not as a challenge, but a confession. For a moment, I couldn't answer. The hum of the city outside filled the silence between us, steady and unhelpful. Finally, I said, more often than I should. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the floor, her hair falling forward as she sighed. Yeah, me too. Something about the moment felt fragile, like glass. One wrong move, and it would shatter. Then the door opened again. Miss Hartley stepped back in, the faint tension from the call still in her shoulders. She looked at the two of us, the closeness, the silence, and her expression softened just enough to reveal a flicker of something else. Something unspoken. I started to step back, instinctively, but her hand reached out. Just a gentle touch on my forearm, grounding, steady. Stay, she said quietly. Please. Her voice wasn't commanding. It was weary, real, threaded with a kind of vulnerability I hadn't heard before. And in that small moment, her hand warm against my sleeve, Ella watching from the desk, the candlelight fading into the shadows, I realized we'd crossed into something deeper than words could define. The air held everything we couldn't say, and none of us dared to move. The silence lingered after Ms. Hartley's touch, soft, steady, and full of everything we hadn't said. Her hand dropped away, but the warmth remained, like the echo of something meaningful that didn't need to last to be felt. She walked back to her seat slowly, as though the weight she carried all evening had finally decided to show itself. Ella watched her carefully, her teasing calm replaced by quiet concern. "You okay?" Ella asked. Miss Hartley nodded, then sat down beside her daughter. "Just tired," she said. But her tone held something deeper than fatigue, something like surrender. The storm outside had stopped completely. The glass walls reflected our small trio, 3 people in the middle of an office that suddenly felt too human for spreadsheets and screens. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Then Ms. Hartley broke the silence. "You know," she began softly, "when I first started managing this place, I thought the only way to be respected was to be untouchable, to be colder than I actually am." Her eyes were on the candle flame, not on us. Some days I think I've been wearing that armor for so long, I forgot how to take it off. Ella's voice gentled. "Mom," Miss Hartley smiled faintly. "You've been trying to remind me, haven't you?" Ella nodded, her voice quiet. "I just wanted you to let people in again." Her mother looked at her, and for the first time that night, her composure cracked, not dramatically, but enough for her eyes to glisten. She laughed under her breath. "You sound like the parent now. I learned from the best," Ella said, smiling through it. I sat back, trying not to intrude, but Ms. Hartley turned toward me. "You've been listening all night," she said. "You don't say much, but somehow you make it easier to talk." Her words hit harder than I expected. "Maybe because I know what it's like," I said. "Pretending you're fine so no one worries. Acting like the weight doesn't bother you." She studied me quietly, and I could see understanding in her eyes. Not the professional kind, but the personal one. The kind that says I've been there too. Ella reached across the desk, linking her fingers through her mother's. "See," she said softly, "you're not as alone as you think." Miss Hartley squeezed her daughter's hand, then reached toward me. Not far, just enough that her fingertips brushed mine in a gesture more grateful than romantic. "Thank you," she whispered. The word felt simple, but it carried everything she couldn't articulate: the long years of restraint, the exhaustion of keeping walls up, the quiet relief of being understood. The 3 of us sat there, hands loosely linked by touch and proximity, surrounded by the faint scent of candle wax and rain-soaked air. And for the first time that night, it didn't feel like an office anymore. It felt like forgiveness. Morning came quietly, the kind of morning that doesn't announce itself, but seeps gently into the room like a slow exhale. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn. Now the city outside the windows glowed pale gold, streaks of sunlight cutting through the blinds and painting soft lines across the floor. The candle had burned itself out during the night, leaving only a small pool of wax and a faint scent of jasmine in the air. Miss Hartley was the first to stir. She sat at her desk, head resting against her hand, eyes half open, her usual sharpness replaced by a rare calm. For once, she didn't rush to check her phone or straighten her papers. She simply breathed. Ella was curled up on the couch near the window, jacket draped over her like a blanket. Strands of hair framed her face, and in the still light she looked peaceful, not the confident, teasing woman from the night before, but a daughter finally at ease beside her mother. I sat by the desk, watching the city wake up beyond the glass. Cars starting to move, people filling sidewalks, the ordinary world resuming. But in that small, quiet space, it felt like time had slowed just for us. When Miss Hartley finally looked up, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You should get some rest," she said. I smiled. "I think we all should." She followed my gaze to her daughter and sighed, not out of frustration, but gratitude. "She worries about me too much." "She loves you," I said simply. "I know." Her voice wavered slightly. "I just forget how much that matters." For a moment, she was silent again. Then she stood and walked over to Ella, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead with a gentleness that came naturally, though she'd spent years hiding it. Ella stirred, smiling sleepily. "You're still here," she murmured. "Not for long," her mother said softly. "We're going home." I watched them, 2 women bound by years of unspoken love, both finding their way back to each other through a night that was never meant to happen, but somehow needed to. When they turned to me, I stood. "Thank you for letting me stay," I said. Miss Hartley smiled. A real, quiet smile. Thank you for reminding me it's okay to. At the door, she unlocked it. The same sound that had begun the night now carried a different weight. It didn't mark separation this time, but release. We stepped into the hallway bathed in morning light. At the elevator, Miss Hartley paused. She reached up, brushed a stray bit of hair from my forehead, and said, "Take care of yourself, will you?" "I will," I replied, my voice low. Ella grinned beside her. "Don't let her overwork you again," she teased. The door slid open. They stepped inside together, mother and daughter, hands lightly entwined, and I watched them until the elevator doors closed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful, and as I turned back toward the office, sunlight spilling across the floor, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes, the most unexpected nights don't change what you do. They change who you are. If this story touched you, take a moment before scrolling away. Leave a red heart if you've ever found warmth in unexpected places. Subscribe for more slow burn stories, gentle, human, and honest, every week. Because sometimes, the quietest stories are the ones that stay with us the longest.